Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Schmidt. I was trained in Western medicine as a physician assistant, where I was exposed to the dark side of medicine. Through self-education and biohacking, I figured out ways to hack my system, becoming a better version of myself. We'll explore the wisdom and insight of my findings with each episode of the Becoming Superhuman podcast. Hello and welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. We're here with Dale HALAWAY, who is a master teacher, best-selling author, transformational coach, as well as an international speaker, and of course, our resident teacher here on the Becoming Superhuman podcast. Dale, how you doing today?
Awesome, man.
Awesome.
Really, really good.
So as discussed on our last interview, today we're going to be discussing money mastery.
Yeah.
So the term money mastery infers that money in dealing with it is a skill. So can you kind of explain what you mean by the term money mastery?
Absolutely. So, to develop skill around creating more money, two things we need to at least be somewhat aware of. So the first is the skill, because there is skill to doing this, that those skills are all learnable, implying that anybody can learn them, regardless of our education, regardless of our gender, it doesn't matter. Anybody can learn these skills. That said, the skill, in many cases, can only get you so far. So in other words, if I develop a skill that's directly related to creating more money in my world or to increasing my cash flow, which I could do, anybody could do this, right, whatever that skill is, and I start accomplishing just that, well then it becomes, do I end up creating too much? Implying that if I create too much, that subconsciously, I might have still the type of programming inside of me that says I can only earn X per year. I can only have X per bank account. I can only have a certain amount of money at any given time in my possession. Or it sends off an alert to our subconscious. So the subconscious is like this incredibly powerful computer that every single one of us has. It's built inside of us in our own field of consciousness. In fact, it's also a part of our physical body. And so the skill, as significant as the skill is, what I'm now starting to touch on even becomes, at the very least, as significant, maybe even a little more significant. Because you might remember in the last class that we were in together, when I was teaching my soul-powered success class, and remember we went through the subconscious a little bit,
right.
I highlighted that mechanism, that self-sabotaging mechanism that's built into everyone's subconscious. Well, what gets that mechanism to turn on? Well, there's a number of different things, but this is one of them. So money, and here's another piece to money now. So money energetically, it represents a frequency. So $1 means one thing, $1,000 means something else, 100,000 yet again means something else,
Right.
and 1,000,000 and so on. With every zero or two that we add behind or after the one, the intensity of the vibrational frequency of the energy of money increases.
Right.
As that increases, if we have a difficult time matching ourselves up with it. So a good example of this would be is looking at the lottery winners. So because there's so many studies now done on this.
Right.
They started doing studies on this back in the late 80s.
Right.
And you probably already know this, what they have since have discovered over and over again, that anybody who wins basically 100,000 or more within a period of 3 years, around 70-some% of them will go bust.
Right.
They lose it all.
Right.
And in some cases, if the money is too great, sometimes they do really destructive things to themselves. That's that switch,
Right.
The self-sabotaging mechanism within their subconscious that obviously they're not privy to yet, consciously wise.
Right.
They don't even know it even exists. And so therefore, the subconscious just automatically, whoa, red alert, red alert, red alert. We're only used to, $85,000 a year,
Right.
even at the level of responsibility. So, I get a charge sometimes of listening to some of these teachers who talk about personal responsibility, and somehow we can go from 0 to 100, meaning 0, we don't accept a lot of responsibility, and all of a sudden we go to 100% responsibility for our lives.
Right.
From my perspective, I see that as absolutely ridiculous.
Right.
And I see that as ridiculous because I have been teaching for more than 4 decades now, and coaching and mentoring people and so on and so forth. I've never, ever have I witnessed anybody, including myself, go from, say, in current time, I'm struggling at accepting 10% responsibility for myself, meaning the other 90% of the things that happen in my world, I blame it on someone or something else
Right.
outside of myself, and then to morph that to where eventually where I become 100% responsible. It is in part of my greater destiny to rise to that level and become totally responsible for myself, not my next door neighbor, but for myself, but everything that myself includes,
Right.
as in my thoughts and my feelings and my beliefs and my health and well-being and my karma and so on and so forth. There's so many things that ultimately we get to be responsible for that's directly related to us and our expression here on this planet, known as, our wonderful Earth. And so, to this, if the frequency of money comes in too strong, too much, too fast, one of the things that can blow out is where we're at having accepted personal responsibility. I know you probably hang out with a lot of wealthy people, I'm sure, just as I have and do, right? And they all tell me the same thing when I spend time with them. And what I'm referring to right now is what they often say is that back in the day when they had no money, and all of a sudden they got a real serious turbocharge where they went from, $73,000 a year to $1,700,000 a year. And they all say the same thing. They felt this pressure come upon them because they realized, oh my gosh, this is going to require a lot more responsibility.
Right.
It's a whole different dynamic now than it was when I was making $73,000 a year
Right.
versus now making $1.7 million a year.
Right.
Right? So that's just another example.
Right.
And so if they're not prepared for that, then there's a possibility that they might end up blowing it all. And in fact, in my world, with all the work I've done now, it explains why people who come into too much money too fast, they'll often turn to drugs, alcohol, a lot of partying, a lot of sex, a lot of gambling. Heck, I was just working with somebody, one of my clients, only a few months ago, and been working with him for some time, and turns out he ran through a period of low funds, and so what does he do? He takes the funds he has and he goes to the casino, thinking that he's 10 times his money at the casino. Of course, it was a big trick of that of his own ego, but in the moment you don't know that. Right? Next thing you know, he ends up literally siphoning his entire savings account. So he starts with about $47,000, $48,000, and by the time he's done over a period of less than 90 days, it's pretty much all gone with the exception of a couple $1,000s. So now he's basically pleading to get a session time with me. I come into the session and I feel this cloud and heaviness of deep depression. And all of a sudden, he starts having these really negative, destructive thoughts of what he's going to do to himself. It's like his world came crashing down on him in less than 3 months. Right? So what is that? That's the subconscious. That's that switch. It went into the opposition of that mechanism knowing it's sabotaged. Because what was happening months prior to all this with this gentleman, he started making more money than that of what he was used to making. And he misjudged it, like we all often do when this sort of thing's going on, unless you have a good teacher, good mentor, good coach to help illuminate your pathway. So you can start to prepare for this kind of stuff. But in this case, I wasn't coaching him yet. And so there he was, making more money than he was used to. It just got to be too much. He didn't know what to do because he hadn't yet leveled up to that newer level of greater responsibility for himself, and not just his finances, but money is so fascinating today. It always has been, because first of all, it's an energy. It's fascinating because I've watched it do some really, I could write an entire book on just stories of how I've watched money, either an abundance of it coming in too fast, too furious, or a lacking of it over a good amount of time, and how it's affected people and their lives, the way they live their lives.
Right.
So most people think, well, it only affects people that are broke all the time. That is not true. At least not in my world. And you're agreeing with me because you already know that's not true.
Right.
It can really be tough. I'll give you one more example here of somebody. This was, a number of years back. And his net worth was around $36 million at the time. And he was a brilliant businessman. Still is. Brilliant businessman. Actually, he's probably better today than he was back then because of what I'm about to share with you. And so all of a sudden the market was shifting, and he couldn't shift fast enough with it because he kind of got overwhelmed. Again, responsibility.
Right.
So even though, and his 36 million net worth had come upon him where he had maybe just under 20 million net worth, and it almost doubled in a relatively short period of time.
Right.
And so right on the heels of this, the market started doing what it sometimes can do. Things started to squeeze in, and he hadn't yet leveled up to that new level of responsibility for that amount of money frequency, so to speak. And so, when you know it, it got sabotaged. And in his case, he got it sabotaged. All it took was making a couple of key decisions, and he lost his entire net worth in a matter of a couple of months.
Wow.
Yeah, just if you can think about that for a moment. Like, what might that do to your psyche?
That would be
Like,
crushing.
destroying, devastating.
Right.
Just, he wanted to do some really nasty things to himself as well, right? Good news is he did not. But the other part of the good news is he eventually recovered from that and then learned a lot from that, including some of what we're focused on right now. And then he decided to master it.
Right.
And in a matter of just a few years, he not only recreated it, he more than tripled it
That's
in his
awesome.
recreation of it.
Right.
But that's because the event itself, that was quite devastating, obviously, he turned it around. And he started accessing it, not just from its lowest octave, like, oh my gosh, what have I done? My life is over. Is it even worth me continuing to live anymore?
Right.
What are my friends, what's my family going to think? And so on and so forth. So, because that is there too for people,
Right.
right? Or what about the responsibilities they already have? So in his case, he still had a business, he had a payroll, he had to cover all that, and all of a sudden it's like just overwhelm. Where's the money going to come from?
Right.
And what are these people going to think? What's going to happen to them? They've got families.
Right.
And all of a sudden they're about to find out they've lost their job, right? So you just imagine the pressure at that stage. But uniquely enough, even though it was pretty rocky for the first 30 days after this all went down, but in the next set of the 30 days and beyond, he started to turn it around. He started looking at it from a higher octave, from a higher place in consciousness. Like, wait a minute. And the starting point was, if I can create a net worth of $37 million, and even though I've lost it all, what does that perhaps suggest?
It's possible to do again.
Thank you. It's really possible to do it all over again. And not only is it possible to do it all over again, it might even be more possible to do it in even a better, richer, more expansive, and even real, authentic way.
Right. And faster.
And faster as well.
Yeah.
Because of what it can do inside. That song, What Doesn't Kill Us?
Makes it stronger.
Makes it stronger.
Right.
That is so applicable to these types of situations. But you've got to choose that. And it's really tough when that type of thing happens and you're just challenged to the core of your essence. It's tough to make that higher choice in that moment. And that's where sometimes having the right guide in your corner, the right support in your corner,
Right.
or the right mentor in your corner, whoever that individual or individuals are, to support you through a process such as that.
So now, let's say people are anticipating or hoping to come into money by their work or business, and what's the preparation phase? I mean, is it just slowly earn money, you get to this point and you learn how to deal with things, or where can they proactively take action to prepare themselves so when they do have money, then they'll know what to do with it?
Well, that's a good question. So I would say, first of all, it all depends on where they're at in their own consciousness along their own journey. As in, how awake are they? How conscious are they? Right? So if somebody's not all that conscious and is always defaulting back to their lower energy patterns and using their favorite device to numb themselves down when things get a little hot in their world,
Right.
not that that's bad, it's an is thing,
Right.
that person's going to need to do something very different than the person who doesn't do that anymore.
Right.
Than the person, that is operating, from within a higher state of consciousness, which really means a deeper, greater state of awareness around who they are, what they are, and then to that, how attached are they to the outcomes that they're out to manifest in their world versus how detached are they to the outcomes that they're out to manifest in their day-to-day world. So if I'm really attached to the outcome that I now possibly desperate am attempting to achieve in my world, it right away puts me in a weaker position.
Right.
And that's usually somebody that's operating in a lower octave of consciousness. That's how they would show up.
Right.
Somebody who's operating in a higher octave of consciousness within their physical form is somebody who's probably already super aware of this, or at least somewhat aware of this. And so they recognize, I know what the outcome is that I would like to have, but my work has to do with remaining detached from the outcome. So that my highest grade of energy can come forth to help me create the money that needs to be created. So I remember, there's another story. So a lot of my stories have to do with entrepreneurs, because I've worked with so many entrepreneurs now and business owners throughout the years. And I'll give some other stories in my public seminars as well of, an individual just maybe making $50,000 a year and has some kind of just a really impressive increase. But this example, this is a guy who, as a business owner, runs a company. His payroll, so what's been the greatest amount of payroll you've had to be responsible for so far, that you've been responsible for so far as an entrepreneur in your life?
Like 30 grand every 2 weeks?
30 grand every 2 weeks. All right. So his responsibility to his payroll was $100,000 every Friday afternoon. Thank you. Gives you a little chuckle, right?
Right.
Yeah, I get it. And so, anyhow, so we meet up, and another amazing entrepreneur. So we meet up on a weekend, and the week leading up to the weekend, he lost a bunch of money, and his sales plummeted in his company. So, needless to say, there wasn't the same kind of cash flow because he was doing a carryover. So he wasn't super cash rich yet, where he had a lot of money parked in his company. He was growing rapidly, expanding his company. That's why the $100,000 payroll, bringing on some really super talented individuals to help him accomplish those goals. But here we are on the weekend, and there's a small group of us, and he's announcing to us that he's short on his payroll for the coming Friday to the tune of like $69,000.
Right.
And then he goes ahead and breaks down his numbers from the last couple of weeks, and it looked like there's just no way this is going to happen by the following Friday to come in with $100,000. And so, long story short, he came in, he manifested the $100,000. But one of the big things was to keep him away from attaching to the outcome because you get too attached to the outcome, and all of a sudden now you're operating from desperation versus inspiration.
Right.
And when it comes to money, it's never a good idea to operate from desperation.
Right.
Not if your goal is to increase your money flow. It'll mess you up more and more every single time. Right? Rather, the better strategy is to do whatever you know how to do. And if you don't know how to do this, then go find a good coach that knows how to do this, or a mentor, a guide, and hire him or her. That'll be one of your best investments you've ever made. Because whoever he or she is will pay the dividend back times 2, 3, or 4 to that of whoever the person is. That's, I want somebody like this in my corner.
Right.
Because part of what happens when you are attached, as I was saying earlier on, you at the very least you run a great risk of becoming desperate. When you become desperate, it serves as a pushing energy from the subconscious. So the money, or the energy of money, believe it or not, is very sensitive. And as I often teach it, it's like a sponge. It sponges up anyone and everything. Negative or positive, constructive, destructive, the whole enchilada.
Right.
It's 100% neutral. It does not in itself have the ability to ward, let's say you're being really negative that day, it does not have the ability to ward off your negativity that day.
Right.
Or your depression, or in this case, your desperation.
Mm-hmm.
It does not have it. So rather what it does, it just simply sponges you up. And when it sponges you up, whatever it is you're sending, then by law, it's going to reflect it back to you. You see where I'm going now?
Right.
Yeah? So now it just simply reflects it back. Well, of course, this is very confusing to people, because the people say, but no, didn't you hear me, universe? Didn't you hear me, God? I need $100,000 for that payroll coming up in like just 5 days from now.
Right.
And now it's already Wednesday. I've got 2 more days left. I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. Give me some kind of a sign. Well, if the person is attached to the outcome of the 100 grand, then the odds are they're coming from desperation versus inspiration. What happens when you come from desperation? Inside of us, we have an internal channel. That internal channel leads to that of our highest self, our greater beingness. And until you embody that, the best you can do is connect with it. That's it.
Right.
Right? And so in this case, what keeps the channel open? Does the channel stay open when you're coming from a place of desperation?
Probably.
Or might the channel jam up? Versus, does the channel stay open if you really are coming from a place of inspiration?
Right.
This channel that I'm referring to, or your higher self, this is also where your creativity, your higher creativity, where you might get $1 million idea, or you might get the answer to the problem that you've been struggling with for the last 3.5 weeks.
Right.
And comes out of nowhere. But uniquely enough, it'll always be when you're most relaxed and you're least expecting it. When you're most relaxed and you're least expecting it, you're now operating more from this inspired state versus the desperate state.
Right.
The desperate state jams up the flow.
Right.
The inspired state opens you up to flow.
Right. So it seems like tension, right? I mean, like
Tension,
you
stress.
create tension, stress, and that
Oh.
blocks everything up. And
It blocks it up.
flow, everything doesn't work right.
Think of what the medical doctors have been telling us since the late 70s, right? That, a lot of people's physical problems is psychological. It's what's going on inside of them.
Well, even the word disease, if you break that down, it's dis-ease, meaning you're not at ease. Or so you have a level of tension that is not ease or relaxation.
Exactly, so you're no longer in flow.
Right.
So some people will go and say, all you gotta do, Dale, is you just gotta get in flow. But if I don't know what flow is, if I don't know how to achieve that, then what? You just talk gibberish to me.
Right.
But then you keep on telling me that I've got the problem because all you gotta do is get in flow. No, you maybe have the problem because you don't know how to teach it to somebody like me.
Right.
Maybe that's the problem, you see. Because this, again, becomes both a learned skill, but it also becomes something you've got to rise up to in consciousness. So if I'm going to live my life operating from this inspired state of being, So that way I maintain my flow of creativity, my flow of the answers, solutions to any problem that I have as a strategist. So I'll go into companies, or I'm asked to go into a company and I'll do a strategic planning session. And many times, the CEO will be absolutely convinced by day number 2, like, how do you know all this about my company? I've got people that I pay $350,000 a year that don't know the amount that you know about my company. And you've only been with us for a couple of days. I'm in flow. My internal central channel is wide open.
Right.
So I'm connected to something higher than that of what meets the physical eye or you hear with your physical ear.
Right.
That of what I'm connected to is also connected to you. So if that of what is connected to you knows you really well, then that can communicate with the higher part of me, download it into my brain because I'm wide open. I'm in flow. And all of a sudden I just know things about you and your company. And you're like, whoa, this is kind of weird. Are you from another planet? Or the most common thing I get are you psychic as well? Not just being a strategist. So, but as a strategist, strategy is such a key element if you're going to increase your money flow. And more specifically, if you're going to sustain that money flow. So if somebody was to win a lottery, let's say they won, to keep it simple, $1 million, right? But they've never ever had $100,000 in their possession at any one given time in their 53 years of living this life so far.
Right.
So I want you to think about that for a moment. They've never had $100,000 in their possession before. They've never had it in their savings account. They've never had it, in their backyard. Some people like to keep money in their house.
Right.
My grandfather, when he was alive, who I loved dearly, and to this day I still do, Grandpa Charlie, I tell the story many times, right? He would not put his money in the bank. But I'm telling you what, by the time that man turned 60 years of age, that man had more than $250,000 in cash in his bedroom, stuffed in between the mattress.
Right.
And at the age of 12, I got my first introduction to a lot of money because he opened up the mattress for me one day.
Right.
And he showed me, and I got to roll around it and play it. Seriously, I just had the time of from that point on, I've been changed.
Right.
And just, money is not my God, far from it. I use money as a servant in the way that it was intended to use from the very beginning. But I really appreciate money, and I appreciate the flow of money. And,
Right.
and if anything, when I see people struggle because the economy just turned, or we're going through a recession, or whatever it is, that, as I often say whenever I'm teaching on money in my classes, is that right off the get-go, I want everybody to know that's in class with me right now. Of all things to create, of all things to manifest in your day-to-day world, the easiest thing to manifest is, guess what? Money. Because it's an energy. It's an energy that, like a sponge, and when you understand this and you know how to work with it, and with the intent being to create more of it, you'd be amazed at how money will the energy of money, that is, will begin to respond to you. And so, but to that, you've also got to be somewhat good at strategy. So going back to somebody, if they win $1 million, but they've never had $100,000 in their possession ever before, and the person's 53 years of age, right away, somebody like me, this is a problem.
Right.
I spot it right away. Now, they might not be willing to do that kind of work. I get it. That gets to be their choice. But what I also know, that if they don't do something constructive, there's a possibility that $1 million they just came into, guess what's going to happen? It's going to dissipate.
I mean, most people, if you ask them, if I gave you $1 million today, what would you do with it? Most people are like, well, I'd buy a house, I'd buy a car for my parents, and basically they would run it out and it'd be gone just like that.
No strategy.
Just gone.
Yeah.
And it blows me away how people don't think that you can use the money to reproduce more money.
Yes.
And it's like, maybe we talk about investing, but most people, they're not on the same page, and so they think about the consumer world, where we would go out and buy a TV if you got money, or buy a car, or buy a house, and buy things that don't make more money, as opposed to And as Robert Kiyosaki says, Rich Dad Poor Dad is buying assets versus liabilities.
Yes.
So I get it, and when people don't have that level of responsibility for their money, then it's inevitable that when the money comes in, it's going to flow right back out, because that's what it's always done.
Actually, it gets sucked back out. It doesn't really flow back out. It gets siphoned.
Yeah.
It gets siphoned and it goes to somebody else.
Right.
Is what really happens, because the person can't sustain it.
There was someone that said this. I forgot who it was. The quote that said that if all the money was compiled in the whole world and it was distributed evenly to all the 8 billion people or however many people, within a period of time, couple of years, let's say, all the money would be right back to the wealthy people.
Yeah, that's been spoken on for well over 100 years.
Yeah.
I mean, from back in the days with Wallace Wattles to J.P. Morgan to I'm thinking of somebody else here too. Will come to me.
Rockefeller.
Well, yeah, all of them know that really well, but others that have either written a book and decided to serve people in a way that was rather unique and helpful to people. But it's been around for so long that whole dynamic of money in itself, first and foremost, ought to be one of the easiest things to create. Now, when I say create, I'm not talking about creating $1 million at the blink of an eye. Yet there are people, like the fellow I was talking about to finish that story, wouldn't you know it, he created the $100,000 on the day he needed to meet payroll. Like literally 5 days after he told us this. But he didn't have the money. I've just got so many times where I hear, I'm privy to these kinds of stories because I serve either as their coach or mentor or guide or whatever that might be, and yet I see it over and over and over again. But they operate from this place where they know how to maintain that flow with inside themselves. Mm-hmm. And they know that, the money can either be recreated if it needs to be recreated, it can be increased if it needs to be increased, and then strategically they understand that the money itself also can serve as a magnet. So, meaning the more you have, the more it will attract its like to itself.
Right.
The less you have, the less it attracts its like to itself.
Right.
That's governed by universal law. Right? Mm-hmm. And so, but those who don't just come into it, but those who are able to sustain it, they're the ones who usually know this quite well.
Right.
Where those that are still struggling, trying to increase their cash flow or trying to increase their financial lot in life, whatever that might be, for the most part they don't know it. Or if they do know it, it's just intellectual.
Right.
They have not embodied it.
Right.
Yet, because if they had embodied it, then their financial situation would be much different than what it is today.
Right. So now we've talked a lot about entrepreneurs and business people in regards to money, but obviously all people use money. And I understand you have a course coming up here in November for Money Mastery.
Yeah.
Can you kind of explain who would be interested in that and why?
Well, anybody who would like to increase their either cash flow or increase their ability to earn more or to increase whatever resource they currently have financially, to increase that would be one group. Another group would be, I get a lot of people, whenever we offer the Money Mastery classes, that also have a fair amount of money that come to my classes. And it's a good thing they do, and here's why. Because, believe it or not, there are people who have a net worth of $8, $10, $15 million. And when they go to bed at night, guess what they worry about?
All the money, losing it.
Exactly. And to me, that's like a prison sentence. Okay, so you got 10 million net worth. Is it even worth going to bed at night to lose sleep over this idea that you might lose it all? Remember that story I shared with you of the fellow who lost $37 million? Right. And one of the big lessons that came out of that is if I can create $36 million then that suggests strongly I can do this again, and maybe even in the next round I'll do it even better.
Right.
Millionaires. You know, one of my mentors literally dedicated his life to studying self-made millionaires. And where he said two things. First of all, the majority of millionaires never even finish high school.
Right. Believe that.
Interesting, huh? And number two, the first million is always the toughest.
Yeah.
The second million, it's easier.
Right.
And the third becomes easier, and so on.
Right.
But the reality has been, the majority of people on our wonderful planet don't even get to the first million. Don't even know what this is like.
Right.
And yet, if they were to get to that first million, and even if they were to lose it, in the losing of that, the lessons will be rich, as long as you're open. As long as you're open to identifying and learning whatever those lessons are. They will be rich, because when it comes your time again, and it will come your time again, to recreate the so-called $1 million you had, not only will you create the $1 million all over again, but now you might create $2 million. And then somewhere in that exchange, you feel more a sense of ownership for that money.
Right.
Because now you've leveled up with regard to your personal responsibility,
Right.
consciously wise, where you feel more comfortable in your own skin. You know, I can handle a $2 million net worth now.
Right.
Whereas 7.5 years ago, I could not handle it. It stressed me out.
Right.
Or, as in the person who has a $10 million net worth and goes to bed at night, and they're worried, they're having a hard time sleeping because their biggest fear is they're going to lose it all. Well, that's only going on because they still haven't learned yet.
Right.
And their fear is getting the best of them. So it looks like, hey, come on, Dale, you've got $10 million. What's the issue?
Right.
Go hire somebody and pay them $60,000 a year to manage your funds and put you on a budget.
Right.
Right? Get an investment manager to invest some of the money, get it working for you. Right? You're going to be fine.
Right.
You're going to be just fine. But when somebody's afraid, they don't think that way.
Right.
Why? Remember that central channel? It gets what?
Closed up.
It gets closed up. It's all jammed now. So they're no longer getting inspiration as an inspired thought from their higher self. Rather, they're desperate. I got to hang on. I got to hang on. I got to hang on even tighter.
Right.
To the point where it begins to disrupt their sleep at night.
Right.
And so, to me, that is not fun at all. And I say that because when it comes to manifesting money, especially larger amounts, one of the things I teach in my money mastery classes is let's find a way to have fun with this.
Right.
And let's keep it fun. Because you keep it fun, you stay lighter. When you're lighter, you become freer. When you're freer, you're no longer desperate. When you're no longer desperate, you become more inspired. When you're inspired, that means that channel's open.
Right.
And so not only are you inspired to have fun with possibly making even more money, but to that, you're now more connected to your own higher self.
Right.
Your real self. I mean, how cool is that?
So people that are just coming up and trying to figure out, and basically figure out how they can take on more responsibility with their money, right? That you're trying to teach people to level up and get to this next level of understanding.
Well, take on more responsibility, also to let go of the fear
Okay.
or the scare, because that's also known as scarcity consciousness. So, and this is another really important point here. So just because somebody appears to be wealthy does not mean to say they're not afraid.
Right. Yeah, I say this all the time because I have people that tell me they're scared, and I'm like, you got to have courage.
Yes.
But courage is not the absence of fear. Because
Exactly.
even the bravest soldiers out there,
Yes.
they're scared shitless
You
in
got
many
it.
cases, but yet they do it anyways.
Yes, yes. So this is a really important piece here. So that other group that I was alluding to that sometimes will find themselves in my money classes is that group that they've already got a couple $1 million,
Right.
but they're hoarding it for the reasons, or at least some of the reasons that we've just highlighted on, right? Well, now they come to the class, they get something very different than the other group. But it's, and to whatever group you're a part of, the bottom line is when we're done, it becomes profoundly meaningful to you.
Right.
And somehow, some way, it impacts you in a way where whatever your intention was as a way to maybe increase your cash flow. Maybe it's to get better at managing your money. Maybe it's to put your money to work for you. In my money classes, at least to this point, I don't offer any advice on stocks or crypto or that kind of stuff. At some point, I'm possibly going to consider doing that too, just to have another adjunct in the class. But for the most part, where I take people to where I believe to be the most impactful place, and that has to do with your current relationship to money. And then once we get that established, then what the class does, it helps you to level up. So we go to the wealthy person, their current relationship to money is they're afraid of losing it, even though they've got $5 million in their bank. That's no fun. That squeezes all the fun out of it. It squeezes all the joy out of it. In fact, sometimes those people end up having a massive heart attack and dying at an early age. And then they leave $2 million for the government. How about that? That wasn't very productive. Well, it depends on who's looking at it. I suppose if the government was looking at it, they said, no, that was really productive.
That's great for us.
That was really good.
Or your son that inherited all the money.
Or your son that inherited all the money, but then maybe doesn't understand what he inherited, and who knows what might happen with that as well. So it's really recognizing that every single one of us in current time are in a direct relationship, whether we are aware of this or not, whether we are conscious of this or not. We are all in a direct relationship in that of our current time reality to the energy of money. Those that have a lot of money that can keep it have a better relationship to money. Those who have a little bit of money, but always have a little bit of money, and they're happy all the time, they too have a good relationship to money. Those who have patterning around constantly struggling for money, or struggling around money, whether it's struggling to create more money, or it's sabotaging money, or it's you already have money, but you're so afraid you're going to lose it, so you live in this, like terror, that one day it's all going to come crashing down on you. For those, first of all, it squeezes the fun and joy out of it, but second of all, they just do not have the type of relationship that they could have to the energy of money than that of the others that I just mentioned. And yet, when your relationship changes for the better, I think when I was a young man, I've always had a pretty good relationship to money. But when I was a young man versus now, it's like night and day. It's like, oh my gosh, if I, one of my goals, I remember when I was 18 years old, I put it down to paper. I wanted to be a millionaire by the age of 30. And I was making good money in my early 20s, good money being 30,000 plus a month in income. This is back in the 70s. And so, it was, back then it was still a fair amount of money. Or it was a lot of money back then. And that'd be equivalent to probably, the better part of $1 million today, in today's time. So, but I had, I didn't have the type of relationship back with money then that I have now. I've had that relationship. One of my earlier mentors was Jim Rohn, and we would talk about money a lot, money and success, a lot. And, and he would always encourage me. He said, Dale, just start putting $110 in an investment account a month. He said, you're making $20,000, $30,000, $35,000 a month. And then we'd come and visit again 3 or 4 months later. He'd ask me, how's that investment account going? And I'd like you just did, I'd laugh. Oh, but Jim, let me tell you about the new snowmobile I just bought. Or the new camper I just built. Or the new wardrobe I just went and acquired. Or the new house I just bought. He said, I didn't ask you that. Tell me how the investment account is going. Well, I didn't see the value in it. Well, why didn't I see the value in it? And what he used to teach all of us, he used to say, listen, if you just start putting this is back in the 70s. If you start putting $110 a month in an account, and you do that every single month, he said, I can tell you exactly where you're going to be financially 20 years from today. And when you're as young as you are, Dale, like 20 years from now, you're still going to be a young man.
Right.
The difference is going to be you'll be a millionaire. How about that?
Right.
I heard him. I just couldn't receive him.
Yeah.
So as a result, I never did the $110 a month program. And so I went through all my 20s, made a lot of money, and guess what?
Ended up with nothing at the end.
Thank you very much. So, obviously back then, even though no doubt about it, I definitely had a better relationship than most to money. But not like I do today, because when the relationship becomes really vibrant and radiant and conscious and healthy and responsible and so on and so forth, it's not so much how much money you have, it's how the money is always there to serve you, how the money always supports you, how the money never ever lets you down. Or as I often say in my more advanced classes, you get to the point where you just know that you know in your bones, from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head, that money has your back 24/7. And when you know that beyond a shadow of a doubt, deep within your skin at a cellular level, your life financially will have totally transformed for the better, forever. I'm literally a walking example of it. Took me a few decades to get there,
Right.
but I became a walking example of what I just said.
So you embody this belief that money has your back. Then how does that manifest in your life? Then how does that change things?
First thing that happens is you just don't have a lot of stress anymore around money.
Right.
Or as I say, I have a number of definitions on what financial independence is. So when I ask a group of 100 people to give me their definition of financial independence, guess what they say? Usually, right off the top.
$1 million or...
They always nail it into mine. Like, inevitable. It's just, again, the relationship to money is not as robust as it could be.
Right.
That's all. And, but how about this as a definition? To get to a point, meaning financial independence, to get to a point where you no longer ever have to be concerned about where money comes from again.
Right. And you can do whatever you want, whenever you
Well,
want.
that's another definition, but before we get there, might that be free?
Right.
Would that help you sleep better at night?
Of course.
You see? To me, it's a very basic yet so profound definition of financial independence. If everybody on our planet right now had practiced that and ultimately become that, would we have a different planet, financially speaking?
Right.
We'd have more people doing what? Experiencing some level of freedom around their money supply.
Right.
Like, who wants to go to bed at night worrying about money?
Right. So would this in a way be synonymous with the term faith? Like you have faith that things are going to work out with your money?
Well, that would come into play too, but it would come into play in that process. But it's like a relationship. So think of a relationship. So you're happily married. You've got 3 beautiful children. You got a wonderful little dog that likes to jump on your lap and lick you all up. And, a relationship with your partner who has your back. So when you go to bed at night, do you question, I wonder if she has my back? Or do you just know that she has your back?
Right.
Or do you just know that your partner has your back in all ways and all times?
Right. So when you know, you would act in a different way.
Completely.
Right.
You act and you also experience money in a different way. Remember that desperation versus inspiration? Which one do you think you're going to be leaning more now towards?
More inspired.
More inspired.
You don't have the fear.
You don't have to fear, or if you do have to fear, you clear it out right away because you recognize that that's going to take you into desperation, right? But the bottom line is you're okay because you don't have to, because you know that, now this might not make you $1 million, but you know that whatever your bills are, they all get paid. You know that whatever you need for your kids' education, somehow the money shows up. Whatever you need to do something special with your family once in a while, somehow, some way, it all shows up. That's what I'm talking about. So it's not so much the person with the number. Well, I'll be financially independent when I have, $5.5 million in my savings account.
Right.
Right? No, you won't. all that means is you'll have $5.5 million in your savings account. Financial independence is not an outer thing. It's an inner thing.
Right.
As a mentor teacher, I've worked with very wealthy people. I'm telling you that usually when I start working with them, not only do they experience all kinds of misery in their world, all kinds of unnecessary stress in their world, sleepless nights,
Right.
and they still don't have enough.
Right.
But they have a net worth, according to their CPA, of $43 million.
Right.
How is it possible that you still don't have enough when your CPA confirms to you that you have a net worth of $43 million?
Yeah.
How is that even possible? And yet, I know of people who, at least at the beginning when we got together, it was not enough. They needed more. But you know the person who needs more? Guess what?
They're going to need more again.
They always need more.
Right.
They always need more. They need more. And I'm not saying you can't go out and get more.
Right.
Because if that's what you want, then have at it.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is to be able to be at this place where you truly become financially free on the inside or financially independent. So where you come to know that you know in your skin at a cellular level that money has your back. That you no longer have to worry, be concerned about where money comes from again. So now let's go to the person who has a $10 million net worth. If that person had that level of financial independence going on within them, would they be sleeping well at night?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, because now they still might have a fear or two that they're going to have to go through or work through. But the difference is they're no longer concerned about where money's coming from.
Right. So you can use that thought energy on something else that's more productive, right?
Well, in this case, let's say they do lose their $10 million.
Right.
If I get this down as a basic principle, can you see how powerful this could be? If I get this down, now I didn't know this when I was in my 20s. I didn't even know this into my 40s.
Right.
It took me into my 40s to ultimately uncover this and start to unpack it. And then achieve this level of financial independence internally. But you know what, Trevor? It was one of the best things I've ever done on a financial level for me.
Right.
Because once I achieved that, guess what?
You open up opportunities.
Well, not only did it open up opportunities, but it's never, ever gone away. That was back in my 40s.
Right.
And I assure you, I'm a lot older than my 40s now.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit, right? And so I get this. If everybody on the planet had this, which is one of my intentions with my money teachings, is to help, I don't know if I'll help everybody on the planet, but I'm going to help as many as I possibly can
Right.
in the course of my life experience here. Because if I can do this, guess what?
Anybody.
Anybody can. Because if you really understood where I was starting from and what I had to work with in the earlier days, you would see right away, no, if that dude can do it.
Right. So now, let's say we develop this level of, comfort with money, and we feel good about it. We know that money's got our back, but then the time comes when it doesn't seem like money has our back. And is that like kind of like with drugs or alcohol, like you slip back into your old habits? Is that...
It all depends. Now we'll come back to your question around faith. So if I got to the point of not just knowing that money, and when I say money, I'm talking about the energy of money. Not talking about the dollar bill, so to speak,
Right.
or whatever your currency is that you're currently using in the country in which you reside. What I'm talking about the energy of money. I'm talking about the essence of money, right? But it's very different. It's on a much deeper level now. So, but when I know that's got my back, that's one level. The next deeper level has to do when I know that I know. To get to this place of knowing that I know. That's where now I'm in complete faith. Complete faith that the energy of money within the larger umbrella of the universe or God or the divine always has my back financially. Now, it might not be what I want in the moment. What I want in the moment is I want an extra $30,000 because I want to buy a new boat.
Right.
Rather, it is something to do with I've got a big bill or a couple bills I was not expecting to have to pay, and I don't have the extra, like the business entrepreneur, the businessman, who needed $100,000 in his payroll. Heck, I just had this happen like literally 3 months ago with a new business client where something similar, not at that same level, but something similar where he was low on cash. We did what I call a private intensive together. Private intensive is very different than me just doing a session. That's where we get together for the better part of a day, sometimes 2 or 3 days in a row.
Right.
It's pretty hot in the best of ways, meaning it's very intense. And it's like a personalized seminar direct to you and your life. And so he was in a situation where, he needed another couple $100,000.
Right.
Now he had a little more time than just a week. But it was so obvious to me that he has the ability to manifest money out of nothing. And by the way, we all do, believe it or not. Just some are a lot better at it than others.
Right.
And he's one of them that's clearly better at it than most people.
Right.
And I saw this ability in him, but he didn't have confidence in his own ability yet. And so right away, as soon as I saw it, because remember, I do have that ability to read into the past timeline, the future timeline, the present timeline, which also means I can read into your subconscious, but only when it's most appropriate. In other words, what it is your higher self wants to show me. That would be based on however it is that I'm currently serving you or helping you or assisting you along your journey. And this entrepreneur as well that I'm referring to is so highly skilled. Remember, we started off by it starts with skill. So highly skilled at manifesting, like hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some cases in less than 30 days. Out of the blue. Like, absolutely amazing.
Right.
And yet, he's about to make a decision that if he pulls the trigger on this decision, it's going to be at least a $250,000 hit. Only he can't see it just yet. And I can. So the facilitation of that intensive during those couple of days was to get him on board. To get him on board to where I could help him to see what it was that I was being shown.
Right.
And sometimes that's not an easy thing to do.
Right.
Because what happens with us, we can create all kinds of blockages around what it is that we're to be seen in our own life, in our own greatness, so to speak, in his case.
Right.
And then because we also have that ego, and if the ego is really smart and clever, and the ego wants to throw a monkey wrench into things, because maybe we're moving a little too fast, we're increasing too much frequency, which the ego has often been known to do, the ego can create something, and the person's not even aware of it. In this case, he wasn't aware of it. He was about to pull the trigger on what's going to turn out to be a good, healthy $250,000. And bottom line, by the end of the intensive, he knew, like beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the decision he was about to make just prior to that intensive during this time, had he have made it within a matter of a couple of months, he would have been down at least $250,000. And so once he saw this, he was just blown away in the best of ways.
Right.
Because, oh my gosh, I came this close to making the decision.
Right.
And then right away he started reflecting back on some of the decisions he made in the past. We had somebody else in his corner, whether it was his wife or partner, or a mentor or coach like myself, who could see something, he just couldn't see it.
Right.
But he wouldn't listen to any of them. But their only way to get to him is just basically get in his face.
Right.
And say, hey, Trevor, you're about to lose X.
Right.
And then Trevor says to Dale, I don't think Dale even knows what I'm talking about right now. You know what? Maybe I'm starting to question Dale right now.
Yeah.
Is he being negative on me right now? No, it could be. Dale is your biggest angel, biggest, brightest angel right now, where Dale can see something that Trevor's about to do,
Right.
and the consequential effect that's going to come upon him as a result of doing that Trevor can't see in this moment.
Right.
So then it becomes, if I'm going to really help Trevor, if anybody's going to help Trevor, we've got to have a way, strategically wise, intuitively wise, to help Trevor see what we see. Because if we don't, guess what's going to happen? Failure. The person's going to go pull the trigger.
Right.
In this case, obviously he didn't, but it took a couple of days. And it was the last half of the second day, and all of a sudden, you want to talk about a light bulb moment. To the point where tears started rolling down the sides, down his cheeks.
So is this like he just didn't believe that it was possible?
What was possible?
That the thing could go wrong, or?
Well, he wasn't even thinking that way. He already knew. It's almost like it's. Remember, whenever that sort of thing happens, you can always be assured that the ego's at play. Always. And I don't say this to get down on the ego. Far from it. I know the ego quite well. I've written 3 books on this. So, I know how it works. I know why it's there. I know why we have one. I know what we're to be doing with it, and so on and so forth. And I also know its purpose. It's clear objective. And so in this case, his ego basically wanted to slow him down.
Right.
And so out of that, what often happens when this sort of thing happens is there's an arrogance that comes upon that person. So now this happens more emotionally, on an emotional level, but there's an arrogance where I know more than you do. So let's say in his case with his partner, his significant partner that is. So his partner says, I'm not feeling good about this. Don't worry about it, honey. I know more than you do.
Right.
Everything's going to be just fine.
Right.
But meanwhile, your honey is picking it up intuitively, something's off. And even though your honey might not be able to hone in on exactly what's making it off, but she or he knows that it's off. But the challenge is you won't listen to him. Because in that moment, you're acting out more arrogantly, implying that you know better than anybody else. And you already know that this is all going to work out. You already know that I'm going to make X as a result of it. It's the classic of the person who goes out and gambles their money away. Don't worry about it, honey. I'm going to go out and I'm going to make this all right. I'm going to take our $10,000 that we have in our savings account, late at night when you're sleeping. I'm not going to tell you in advance, but come tomorrow morning when you wake up, I will have saved the day. And come tomorrow morning, your honey wakes up, but you didn't save the day. In fact, you lost the day because you went through the $10,000 savings account over the last few hours. So how does that happen? Well, on an emotional level, it's always going to have something to do, at least in my view, it's going to have something to do with arrogance, because this is also known as an over-cockiness. The person's not fully, remember that central channel again?
Right.
It's jammed. Because they're not connecting with their higher self. Because your higher self doesn't even think this way.
Right.
At all. If your loving partner is sharing with you, I don't know, honey, there's something off. Can we at least hold this off for a bit? But you still move forward anyways. Or your coach and your mentor is, I've got so many stories here around this sort of thing. I've just seen it play out so many times. Heck, I played it out in my own life.
Right.
Way back when, and painfully I might have.
Right.
Where it's brought upon some really negative consequences or even negative karma for me to then deal with.
So would this be something where someone's like resisting change, or having some struggles that they can't get past?
Yeah, you could play that in there too. So if I'm on a mission to, unconsciously now, mind you, if I'm unconsciously on a mission to sabotage some part of my world, right, then there will always be resistance towards that. But it's not just towards that of what I'm sabotaging. It's resisting that of which is attempting to speak to me, either within or without, as in somebody that's very dear to me in my life, that's more objective rather than subjective, because now I'm acting really subjectively. And that in itself is a big challenge for people, to learn how to live more objectively versus always living subjectively, right? So that's why most people do better when they have a coach. Because if you get a real good coach and the coach that's most right for you, or a real good teacher or the teacher that's most right for you, or a mentor, right? That's part of how they serve you. They're the ones who show up consistently and constantly, maintaining a level of objectivity and neutrality that you can't yet do.
Right.
And that in itself could be worth its weight in gold right there alone.
Right.
And so in this case, the person's gone subjective.
Right.
They lose their ability to be objective, which means now they're disconnected from that greater flow,
Mhm.
from their own higher self, from their own spirit or soul. And so they're basically on their own. And so now they're going to make a decision. So it looks like they're in flow, making a decision, when in fact they're resisting the incoming message to say, something's not right here. And so, yes, so in that case, now they're resisting the change. What would the change be? The change here has to do with, to change my ways. So now if it's me, and of course I would be doing this unconsciously, because if I was fully conscious, I would never do such a thing, obviously. It would be way too painful. So I need to be somewhat unconscious. So now I'm unconscious, so I'm resisting the incoming higher message, either direct from my higher self or my guides or guardian angel, or from my wife or husband or partner or absolute best friend or my coach or mentor and so on, that I always trust and respect, and yet I'm resisting them. I'm going to do it my way now, because I'm the only one that knows the right way here. Right? So in that, I'm resisting changing my way. My way being, I have the way. My way being, I'm going to do it my way. And so on. So that's what I'm ultimately resisting the change on, because part of also what's happening as this is going on is we're being prompted to change something within inside of ourselves. And whenever we're being prompted to change something inside of ourselves, it's to change the way we are or have been behaving,
Right.
or the way we've been thinking, or in the way in how we've been perceiving things, or to change ourselves from what would be known from our older way of being to maybe a newer way of being, as in B-E-I-N-G.
Right. So now you're talking a lot about change here, and I know that you have this seminar coming up that's you call it the Breaking Through to the New You.
Yes.
That's September 28th and 29th. And I know that you're trying to help people to get through their struggles and challenges and actually change, because you can't change unless you actually change something.
Yes.
So can you tell us just a little bit briefly about what's that about, and how would that help people get through to the new them and level up to the next octave?
Yeah, well, first of all, change is governed by a universal set of laws. And one of those laws is the law of transformational change. And it basically says that you and I are in a constant flow of change. In fact, change is in the natural order of things. Everything and everyone eventually changes.
It's the only constant.
It's the only constant. And now we can go one of two different directions here. So whereas we could change for the better, or we could change for the worse.
Right.
And that's the part that most people haven't made the connection to yet.
Right.
And more specifically, the people who will broadcast out loud to their families or their communities, listen up everybody, I don't change. It's an absolute impossibility. And not because I Dale HALAWAY, say so. Far from it. I started studying the universal law long ago, and then eventually became a master in teaching universal law, or the universal laws. And this being one of them. It's so interesting to know how many people talk about resistance, will resist this law and actually violate this law, of course, without even knowing that's what they're doing,
Right.
thus making their life worse. If you go back to change has already been built into our character, it's been built into our way, it's been built into our consciousness of humanity, it's been
Right.
built into the divine. It's been built into every aspect of who it is we are at a being level to be in the natural order of things. The planet works by the exact same law. Right? Everything around us. Everything's going to change, and everyone's going to change. The question we all ought to ask ourselves, okay, so 10 years from now, will I have changed for the better? Or better yet, 1 year from today? 1 year from today, will I have changed my life for the better, and will I have the results to back that up? Or will I have changed for the worse?
Right.
Because this, I can assure everybody, that 1 year from today, you're all going to be 1 year older. The question is, where will you be in relation to your own life along your own journey 1 year from today? Will you have changed for the better? And will you have something to report back? Will you have a result, a tangible result that says, I, Trevor, have literally changed the way I am as a man, as a father, as a husband, as an entrepreneur, as a being, as a friend, as a neighbor on this planet from literally 1 year ago to today.
Right.
And if I've changed, where's the proof?
Right.
Where's the proof that says I literally have changed for the better? Because if we don't do this, what I've discovered as a result of all the work I do with all kinds of people, in both my public classes, my business classes, my private coaching or mentoring sessions, and so on and so forth, is that 1 year from today, we will have either changed something for the better, or something within us will have changed for the worse.
Right.
Our health might become worse.
Right.
That's a change.
Right.
We were talking about finances earlier on. Our money flow might become more restrictive.
Right.
It's changed. Whatever it is, it will not be the same
Right.
that it is today, 1 short year from today.
Yeah.
And I invite you to put it to the test. Don't just take it from me. Put it to the test. Prove this to yourself.
Yeah.
You'll see it once you start tracking.
Yeah.
Once you start tracking what's actually occurring in your world from 1 year to the next, it's just a phenomenal dynamic. So this class on breakthrough to a new you. So in order to break through to where you're experiencing a new version of you, as I always suggest, you're going to want change to become your best ally. I'm not talking about the change you're walking around with your pocket, in your pocket or in your purse right now. I'm talking about the real deal where you really learn about change. And there is a system here. There is a body of teachings that are so practical and so profound in terms of whatever it is that you really are to be changing about yourself, that you can actually change those things about yourself.
Right.
Like literally, for real.
Right.
And as you do this, at some point, maybe not right away, but at some point you begin to break through into experiencing your life from the perspective of a whole new you. I know that might sound cliche, but as it turns out, when you really know how to do this and you're actually doing it, it's not cliche.
Right.
It actually happens. And I know all kinds of people where this happens like almost every single year. In fact, if you want to know the real deeper truth here is, we're to be turning this all into a lifestyle, where change becomes like our middle name.
Right.
Because once we start to tap into the greater truth of who it is we already really are, that might very well be hidden from us right now. The greater truth in terms of your limitless beingness. And you begin to tap into that, that's ultimately what you're moving towards.
Right.
We all are. But in order to do that, you're going to have these breakthrough moments that lead you to this place of where you become aware, like, oh my gosh, I really am new. And I'm different. Something just happened in my world today that happened 1 short year ago, and I'm noticing like I responded completely different to this exact same thing today that happened with me or for me only 6 short months ago. This is freaking amazing.
Right.
Sign me up. I want more of this. Exactly, because this is what can change your life little by little, slowly but surely,
Right.
for the better and ultimately forever.
Right. You know, I was reminded of this quote that you're either ripe and rotting or green and growing.
Yes.
And that,
Great quote.
you know, I mean, you can kind of imagine a fruit, and it's
Yeah.
that once you get to the ripe,
Yeah.
the fruit dies quickly, it rots
Yes.
off, right? And so this is synonymous to us when we get to this point where I've arrived.
Yeah, you're right.
And I'm here. Now you kind of relax and let things go, and then you start to rot. And I think that happens with a lot of people because they get comfortable and they're not willing to change to continue to grow to the next level. And I see this in business. I see this with relationships. It happens all the time. But when people become conscious of it, as you're saying, you can break through that and continue on this path of expansion and growth. And I think that the key to this really is just the incremental 1% growth on a daily basis or a weekly basis. But you're saying you're breaking it down to the year, but it's obviously has to be shorter increments.
Oh, yeah.
You have to continually get better on a smaller.
Well, and eventually, I mean, my invite to anybody that I get the honor to ultimately teach this to over time is that you want transformation to become a lifestyle.
Right.
So just like your eating has become a lifestyle, your sleeping has become a lifestyle, you want transformation to become a lifestyle.
Right.
Transformational change. I can tell you, it will serve you so impeccably well. There's a lot of talk going around the economy and what's about to come or what's already here or what we're coming into and so on and so forth. And as somebody who is mystical, there is some really heavy stuff coming. There's no doubt about it. But, I've now been through in this life 8, 9 recessions. And I've always been teaching people, about teaching, leading, guiding, supporting, and so on and so forth. And I remember saying this when I was a young guy. If you just stay in this and where you're changing, somehow you're going to get an extra grace. Whereas your next door neighbor who is resisting this,
Right.
I don't need that. I can't afford that. I don't have any time for that. I already know all that anyways. But meanwhile, the results are getting in her life for the most part kind of suck.
Right.
And now the recession comes, or the economy tanks, and whatever. They're the ones who are always affected by it the most. Versus what I'm highlighting right now, and I see this because I've been through so many periods of recessions now, you still might be somewhat affected, but not even close to potentially your next door neighbor,
Right.
so to speak. Not even close.
Right.
And once you experience your life this way, and you realize, wait a minute, I don't have my head in the sand. I mean, there is an economic crash, or there is a recession that we're in, so to speak. I get it. It's not affecting me the same way as it appears to be affecting many of these other people.
Right.
What's going on here? Right? Well, this is where, my second book, Transform Your Destiny, remember the divine birthrights.
Right.
One of the divine birthrights is grace. But how do you get more grace? Good question. Everybody wants more grace.
Right.
But how many times have you ever sat down over a cup of coffee or a glass of juice and you're talking about, I sure would like to have more grace right now. Has the conversation ever gone to this place of and how might we get more grace?
Right.
I would think that would be a good question to ask once in a while.
Right.
What could I do to earn more grace? What could I do to be blessed with more grace? What could I do that would have the divine bestow more grace upon me in my life right now? Right?
Is this where we're going towards God helps those who help themselves? So
That's
if you take action, grace will be attracted to
That
you.
is a basic principle here, one of them, right? That, first you've got to ask to be helped. And when you ask to be helped, then the help will come. And you'll get the help. You'll get the exact help that you need, right? So that's one. But two, bringing it back to transformation or transformational change, when remember, it's the natural order of things. That means it's in alignment with your soul. It means it's in alignment with your higher self, Trevor. So when I turn my life into a transformation as a lifestyle, in other words, I'm no longer resisting change. I'm embracing change now. I invite change. I welcome change. Really, genuinely. Like from the bottom of my feet to the top of my head, there's no more resistance. I don't fight it anymore.
Right.
I don't avoid it anymore. You see? What does that mean? I'm now in alignment. I'm in complete alignment with my higher self. I'm in complete alignment with the truth, the higher truth of who it is I really am.
Right.
That is the greatest thing you can do to be blessed with more grace without even trying from that point.
Right.
Grace will come upon you. Not because I say so. This is how I live my life. I've been living my life this way for years now. And I've taught many people how to live their lives this way. And at some point, their lives start to show up this way too.
Right.
Where I call it the extra. You just get an extra. You just get an extra. And it makes you laugh. It just makes you laugh. It gives you a real good tickle in your heart. Like, this is so cool. Like, if everybody on the planet knew this,
Right.
and then more specifically knew how to do it, because the universe is not holding out on us. As I also say in Transform Your Destiny, I write about, in fact, the theme of Transform Your Destiny, or the tagline, is to become a partner, to become a conscious partner with the divine. Because if you do this, you will be blessed in ways that right now you probably can't fathom. I want to say you, I'm speaking to everybody.
Right.
I mean, it's that phenomenal. Because the divine is just waiting to bless you. The universe is just waiting to bless you. God is waiting to bless you. But kind of like the gentleman that I spoke of here a bit ago, where, here people that love him more than life itself are attempting to get through to him. Something's off with that decision. I don't think you should do it. But he couldn't receive it. He was resisting it.
Right.
Because he thought he had one up over everybody. Turned out they had one up over him, so to speak.
Right.
But then, in order to help him get there, someone else had to be called in that knew what they were doing and be willing to spend a couple of days doing it to get him to a point where all of a sudden he could see what they all had already saw.
Right.
And once he saw it, the shift happened. That fast. You see?
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing here. Only in this case it's grace. So, I've had people in my classes, because all my classes have the transformational element. It doesn't matter what the topic is, whether it's on, money or breakthrough to a new you, or on relationships, or on conscious parenting, or on entrepreneurialism, building a real successful business, on and on and on. It doesn't matter. I always bring transformation in. You know this from the last seminar you were out with me on soul powered success, right? And it's for this reason. I'm constantly either planting the seed in somebody's consciousness, or I'm helping to fertilize the seed so it can kind of start to germinate, to where eventually they've turned transformation into a lifestyle. Because I already know. I know that I know. Turn it into a lifestyle. The universe, the divine, we are to be agents of change. And when we become agents of change, we become even more valuable to the universe. We become more valuable to the divine. Because the divine is all about changing things up. The universe is all about changing things up. It doesn't want it to be the same. And by the way, so is God. God wants to experience more. God wants to evolve more and expand more. You see? And so in this, all of that is going to require the embracing of change. Little by little, slowly but surely, and eventually as a lifestyle to where you're doing it on a consistent basis, like you would have breakfast every morning or dinner every evening with your family.
Right. And to kind of circle back to the money mastery, the change is completely necessary to continue down your path of growth with the money aspect, right?
Oh, it is. It's like, again, going back to somebody who they appear to have a lot of wealth, but they haven't changed their own internal dialogue. They haven't changed their own inner landscape.
Right.
So now they go to bed at night, but they can't sleep because they're so concerned, overly concerned, that they're going to lose the $10 million.
Right.
And so obviously there's a lot to change there. And if they were to change that, if they were to transform or heal that, this is game changing for them.
Right.
And in fact, they might be pleasantly surprised to find out that their $10 million net worth, just by changing this in a relatively short period of time without them doing a whole lot, might move from $10 million net worth to a $15 million net worth.
Right.
It's a blessing. It's an extra grace. It comes upon us in ways like is so beautifully divine, for real. I've witnessed so many blessings, not just in my own life, but the blessings in other people's lives, that when they come upon them, they come when you least expect it, you most appreciate it, and at the exact time that you need it.
Right.
Like all the time. I mean, I get God bumps just even focused on this right now. And lastly, I'll say, and this is available to each and every one of us.
Right.
Now we got to learn how to access it, but it's all available to us. It really is. This is not exclusive to just the elite, so to speak.
Right.
Far from it.
Right. So I know with all of us are concerned about money, and we talked about how you can change yourself, but there's also a lot of other factors that are in play in the economy and the world. And I know you have this program called the Illuminate 25. Is that correct? So you talk about what's to come, and you mentioned in the past that you have these mystical abilities or these abilities to kind of see the future timelines and things of that nature. So can you kind of discuss a little bit about how, like, what would that do for us, and why would it be important to be on these calls?
Well, this particular class, Illuminate, for this year, in December of 2024, that is, this one's titled Illuminate 25, as in 2025. So we as an organization, we do this every year. It's always done in the month of December of the year that we're closing out on and getting ready to move into the new year. And this all comes on the heels of having done many strategic planning sessions for larger companies, where they would hire me and I'd go in and basically work with them about 10 hours a day for anywhere from 4 to 5 consecutive days. They would bring in all their top people, and I would facilitate them through what turned out to be just a phenomenal strategic planning session. And in that, we needed to identify all kinds of things that they had been doing in their past that they needed to let go of, and then more specifically, things that they needed to be doing as a way to propel them into their future, but all living in the present time. And so, anyhow, these sessions I became known for them as a strategist. I'm considered to be a master strategist or a life and business strategic advisor, but also as this strategist. And so what would happen, the results were just phenomenal. I mean, once we would always do these in either October. Well, it always started in November, but then I got so busy I had to start doing them as early as October. Maybe the first couple weekends of December, I would do them for a company, so to speak. And then they'd be because then after we've done it, then there's going to be all kinds of, you got to kind of be with everything, you got to still work it through. There's still more work, like post work, that needs to be done after the actual strategy sessions. And so the idea here was that they'd be all ready to go come January 1st of the new year.
Right.
And that's what we did, and guaranteed every single time. Whatever their sales, whatever their level of productivity, level of effectiveness, we had ways of measuring all this, their turnover, all of it. Clearly, everything would improve dramatically into the coming year. Well, I did this for a number of years, and at some point I was inspired one day. The inspired thought came around, boy, what would this be like if I could blend this into my public seminars somehow? Because I've been doing all this work with companies, but simultaneously I also do work with the general public.
Right.
And I've stayed pretty true to that throughout the years. And what would this mean? Well, first of all, I know I would not be able to get them in a room for 5 days. And, because the general public sometimes they want the result right away, which is sometimes kind of ridiculous, but nonetheless, it very seldom works that way. But whereas a CEO, it doesn't take a lot to speak to him or her at this level. They get it right away.
Right.
Like, no, this is important. We're doing it. What's the investment?
Yeah.
Where do we send the funds? Let's get this thing scheduled. Let's do it. And then we're going to do it again next year, and the year after, and so this is going to be like a staple in our company. So how could I do this for the general public? So this is about maybe 9 or 10 years ago. And so 7 years ago, I found a way to do it. And so I designed my first somewhat similar class to what I'm talking about for the general public. And it basically consists of 3 key aspects or 3 different elements. And the first one is where I basically guide you through what's actually occurred in your life over the last calendar year. And we get into it. There's no doubt about it. I know on purpose. And the reason why this is so critically important is because if you are going to have a new year, as in the coming calendar year, if that's going to be new, you need to know and ultimately do complete this year that you're to be closing out.
Right.
Another way of saying the same thing, if you leave the year that you're leaving incomplete, it will dog you into the coming new year.
Okay.
Again, one of the advantages I have, I've done this so many times with so many different people, not just here in the United States, but other countries around the world. You see it every single time.
Right.
Right? And in fact, if you put this to the test right now, you'll probably see it just in your own circles, in your own communities. Right? Most people, they basically do what I call, they're in repeat mode.
Right.
So whatever happens in 2024, or whatever happened in 2023, is somewhat of a repeat in 2024,
Right.
and so on.
Right.
Might come in a little louder, a little more intense, a little more shocking, right? Because everything is always changing, either for the better or for the worse, right? But nonetheless, this is usually how it goes with a lot of people, unless you do this.
Right.
Now, you either do this on your own, or you call in somebody who really does know what they're doing as a professional at this, or an expert or authority on this, and you rely on him or her to help you to accomplish this.
Right.
And so this first piece is really significant for the reason I just said. Now I'm going to jump to the third piece, and then I'll come to the second piece. And this is the order in which they come out in the course of this particular class. So that first piece is what we focus on at the beginning, and then I'm going to jump to the third piece that we do towards the end. And that third piece has to do with, okay, so we're closing out 2024 this year, because we're still in 2024 right now.
Right.
So we're going to close out 2024. We're going to complete it as best as we possibly can. And then what we're going to do, we're going to set this up, because what this does, this genuinely starts to open you up to literally creating a new year.
Right.
A new year.
Right.
Not just a New Year's Eve where you crack open a bottle of champagne and you salute with a glass of champagne to your dearest friends or your lover or partner, and then you recite your New Year's resolution.
Right.
Right? And then what happens?
You start over again.
They start over again. And all the resolutions that we said we're going to do, lose the weight, go to the gym, do this, do that, by February of the new year, guess what?
Back in the same place.
Back in the repeat mode.
Right.
Right?
So this is like, we talk about like biblical terms to say the death and then the rebirth.
Exactly.
So
That's what it is.
You lay down this last year to rest, and then so you can have the birth of a new
A
year.
true new year, a truly new birthing year. Absolutely, well said. So in that, I walk the group through exercises that become very personal to you, the participant in the class. And the bottom line is you come out with a more working plan made up of a handful of goals that are remarkably important to you. Not to me, to you. This is a real important piece. And then the other piece, because I'm a big cheerleader for the soul on planet Earth, so I always blend the soul in. And I have a way to help you to identify a goal that's being created from that of your ego, your lower self, or a goal that's being created or inspired from that of your soul, your higher self. So, and then between that, you get to choose which one are you going to honor, right? But out of that, you walk out with some kind of a plan that you get really excited about, you feel really empowered with because you feel really connected to it. So that's the third and last piece. Now I'm going to come to the second piece and I'll wrap this up. So now the second piece, this is where every year, I'll highlight what I just referred to as like the highlights or the benchmarks throughout the coming new year. And so because I have this ability, or my ability has woken, or I've woken up to the ability, is probably a better way of saying that, because I know there's a lot of people that possibly have this ability that just haven't woken up to it. And that is where I'm able to see things that are coming before they land, before they come here, before they arrive, so to speak. And not just if I'm working with somebody individually, or say I'm working with a CEO in their company, I can see things, I can forecast things, like just all those kinds of things that become a great value usually to the CEO. Same thing here with this group, becomes a great value. So what happens, I'll highlight the coming new year. And I'll narrow it down between 6 to 8 points, right? And half of them will more likely be negative, and the other half will be positive. Or what I often refer to, half of them are going to be on the lower octave, the other half are going to be in the higher octave. I do that all on purpose, because the reality is there is some negative stuff coming. To that exact same reality, there's also some awesome positive things coming. And so as you come to know what these are, what it does for you is it helps to empower you. It helps to empower you in a way like, holy cow, if this is true, this is really helpful to know in advance. Why is it so helpful? I can begin to plan accordingly, including that plan, as in my plan for 2025, made up of my goals and my intentions and my action strategies and so on and so forth. Now I can make it even more uniquely fitting to the theme throughout the year, the new year, and begin to work with the energy instead of possibly working against the energy. I don't even know what I'm working against. How cool might that be? Right? So now you can see why the CEOs often get really excited. Once they get their first experience with this, they just, as soon as we're done, the very next thing before I board the plane from whatever city I'm in, first thing is, can we get next year's schedule? Like with my top people right now, I want to get it scheduled next year. You need a 50% deposit? Tell us where to send it. Bottom line. Because it's that powerful. And it helps that much. Well, the same thing when I'm doing this for the general public is that this middle piece, the second element that I do in between element 1 and element 3, the element 1 being the past, and the element 3 being the future, as in this case it's 2024 is the past, 2025 as in the future. But when we do this middle piece, and preparation of coming into now the third and final piece of this day, or this weekend, because it's really about a day and a half long, this class, is of immense value to people. And I can tell you this, 7 years ago when we did the first one, so this is going to be our 8th year now, we've got people that come every year to this. It's the most attended class I do throughout the entire year. They do this as a staple, just like the CEOs, right? Exact same thing. And I've never asked them to. It's just the profundity and the practicality and even the spirituality of doing this every year within the leadership or guidance of somebody who has done this hundreds of times for people, is just of great value. And people get really, really excited about it. And the bottom line is people that, well, and you'll hear it, people that were with us 2 years ago, they said, yeah, it was interesting. I remember that one benchmark he gave us in that coming year, and it almost played itself exactly. Like, that was so helpful. And they got the contrast because their friends weren't at the class. And they couldn't communicate it to their friends the same way I can communicate it. Right? And so their friends didn't buy it. So as a result, their friends had a very different experience with that particular benchmark or highlight than they did. And that was cool for them because that gave them stark contrast. And they're like, holy cow, not only is this really happening, but because I knew it was happening and because I kind of put it in my plan, I was able to better navigate through it. It didn't really affect me all that much. Or how about this one? So that's more on the negative side. What about the positive side? How cool will it be for you to know some of the positive themes that are coming in 2025, to know them in advance when you're putting your plan together, when you're putting your own personal, spiritual, business, career plan together, financial plan together for yourself and your family for 2025. How cool would that be for you to know what those are in advance?
Right. I'm sure that would help with your money mastery, right?
And money.
Your ability to financially
Everything.
plan everything.
Everything. It's amazing, amazing class. We do it over a day and a half. We always do it in December. This time it'll be done in the very first part of December. It'll be one of your, maybe not the best investment, but definitely one of your best, or one of your better investments that you've made throughout all of 2024 for year 2025, new year.
Yeah, so preparing. So amazing talk today. I appreciate this. This has been Money Mastery. Lots of amazing information, not only about money, but we touched on breaking through to the new you.
Yes.
As well as this Illuminate 25, which would be the preparation for the new year and planning, which comes out. I mean, we're talking about money here, but it's about everything, right?
Yes.
It's planning your whole life.
Yes.
I mean, if you don't have a plan, then you're not. It's like you don't have a target. Yeah. Can you imagine like leaving the house and not having directions or know where you're going? Can you just be driving in a circle? So I think that having something like this to highlight what is coming will help you to navigate and plan a better future for yourself and your family, for that matter.
One of my best friends in my young adult life, I was 19 years old, and I remember sitting in his office one day when I was 19, and he was emphasizing the importance of, okay, Dale, now that we're going to be working together, first thing we want to do is create a little bit of a plan. Well, I had never done anything like this before. I'd always kind of flown off the side of my hip, so to speak.
Right.
And so I said, okay, well, and right away I owned up and I said, I don't know how to do this, so I'm going to basically place my trust in you that don't worry about it. He said, well, as long as you're a good student, he would say, I'm going to help you to pull this off. One of the things that he emphasized with me back during that time was this, and he would reiterate it a number of times thereafter. That was this: those who fail to plan are planning to fail. Those who actually plan are truly planning to succeed. And, that stayed with me just throughout the decades, because I've watched this. There are people that just, no matter, they're in their 50s and they still won't do any planning.
Right.
They either don't know how to do it, they just are too lazy to do it, or they're just in a downright lot of resistance around doing it, or they think they don't have to do it, whatever. And meanwhile, their life just kind of repeats.
Right.
Like a groundhog day.
It's like default.
It's like default, right? And yet the part that's just absolutely amazing to me, that their life could be so much better.
Right.
Their life could be so much richer. I'm not just talking about financially, I'm talking about richer in spirit.
Experience too.
And experience. Everything about their life could be better and richer and more alive and more fulfilling and maybe even more satisfying and happier and all those wonderful things.
Right.
But yet, that's how they lived in their 40s. Now they're living that way in their 50s. And who knows, they might even find themselves living that way in the 60s.
Right.
Or in their 60s. And yet, it could be different.
Right.
They could just simply say, you know what? It's time that I break through to a new me.
Right.
And I learn a little bit about how to change this.
Right.
Because this programming is no longer working for me. This program is keeping me stuck.
And it's never too late.
It's never too late.
I mean, as long as we're still alive, as long as we still have life in our breath or in our heart,
Well said, Trevor.
we can
No.
change,
No.
right? And anytime you can change, then you can potentially have a different outcome.
The student that's the oldest in my network is 82 years of age. 82. Now, from a distance, you'd never know it.
Yeah.
You would never know it. And yet, I'll bet you know 28-year-olds that God, he's acting like he's 53. Right? And yet, this person has got a vibrance and a radiance about them that is just, it's a standout.
Yeah.
But it's because of what we're talking about,
Right.
it's never too late to change.
Right.
That if there's something going on in my world that I don't like, guess what? I can change it.
Right. Yep.
I can change it.
You're not a tree, you can get up and move.
I like that.
Right.
That's really good. That's really good.
So let's wrap this up here.
Yeah.
And you know, you were talking earlier, and the thing that really stuck out to me as far as, so for our next talk, I want to discuss conscious parenting.
Okay.
Now I got 3 kids, so that when you said it, it's like, oh, I got to talk about that. So, and I'm sure a lot of other people out here have the same issue. You know, there's a lot of, we'll say, generational issues with kids, and I think that there's a lot of insight that would be beneficial for parents nowadays. So that's what we'll talk about next time.
Sounds good.
But until then, thank you so much, Dale. I appreciate you, and as our residential master teacher here, you've lived up to your name, and I appreciate it so much. So thank you.
All right.